live on this on YouTube.
All right, I've just requested to join.
Cool. Oh, I've invited you as well,
Okay.
which is great. All right, we're gonna hit this over here so I can see that. Great. All right, boom. All right, and look, there we are.
All right, hang on. Turn my sound off on the phone. I think there's a little bit of leakage coming through there, but it shouldn't be enough to ruin anything.
Okay, sounds good.
If
All right,
it gets too much, just let me know and I'll do something about it.
I will scream at you very loud if that
Thank you.
happens.
In my headphones.
Into your headphones, yeah. All
You've been
right.
doing it wrong for 3 years. It's really pissing me off. Throwback.
I forgot about that. That's great. Okay. Hey everyone, what's going on? How we all doing? All right. This is BORASCAST number 3. We're coming to you on Instagram and on YouTube right now. This is awesome. So first off, I just want to say thank you for everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Charles over here for hopping on and doing this all the way from England, from the comfort of his bedroom. So,
Yes.
which is also his studio. So yeah, dude, thanks for hopping on and doing this. I've been wanting to do this with you for a bit now.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So we've had a bunch of people throw in questions and stuff. So we're going to be answering a few of those later on. And I got really no like time limit here. So we can go for as long as people want to hear or as long as we want to keep going. But I guess the way I want to start off first is and I want to have you talk about this because if I do, I just won't shut up. But why don't we let everybody know? First, tell everyone who you are, and then why don't you tell them all how we first met?
Okay, all right. In that order. So I'll look at Zoom and
Okay,
Instagram will be there.
sure.
So my name's Charles. As Max has correctly said, I am in the UK. I'm in Kent in the UK, which is as far southeast as you can get before you get to France. And I am a mix engineer. That is my main job. I do a little bit of production on the side, but mix engineer, that's my main thing. And my main genres are so like pop, indie pop, and obviously some metal with Max as well, some metal and rock. I love all of it, so I'm very happy to do all of it. And that's kind of how my brain works. And that's me and how we met. So
Yeah.
I remember exactly how we met. It was first semester of Berklee in 2015, the fall of 2015. And I don't remember the name of the class.
Oh, I do.
What was it called? It was like, was it writing communications?
Yeah, exactly. It was one of the
Yes.
liberal arts classes that every first semester student had at that time had to take.
Yeah, I think it became college writing. So it's like sort of learning to, write in the style or like at the skill level of like being in college, I guess.
Yeah.
And we met outside the first class. I think back then you shaved your head, like you didn't have any hair at the time.
That was the last. That was the last. For most people that don't know, actually, all of my life up until age 2015, I was 22. So up until age 22, I had short hair all my life. The whole long hair thing did not start until I had gotten one last very short haircut that year. And then I was just like, I'm going to do the long hair thing because I never have. So, yeah, so you caught me at the tail end of that era.
I did. I consider myself very lucky, and then I
Yes.
got to see the evolution as it flowed into this luxurious mane.
Yes.
Lovely, excellent. So yeah, we were outside of writing communications class, and I think at the time, this is going to sound really bad. At the time, I thought you were just really annoying.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, most people do. So,
um, but I don't remember how exactly we like ended up like working together so much or like being in the same band. I think I might have asked you or like I'd seen you around quite a lot, and I think we just got to talking quite a bit because we sat next to each other in that class quite
right.
a lot.
We
And that
liked
was
a lot of
really
the same bands too, I remember.
Yeah, I think that might have been it. That might have been sort of like the instigation behind a lot of like our friendship.
Yeah.
And yeah, we ended up being like in my band, and after college it was like we ended up working together on your album, which was really
Right.
fun.
Yeah.
Uh and here we are now on your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I remember. Yeah. Cause I remember that first meeting with you as well. And at the time, because I remember Periphery had just released the Juggernaut album, and I was really, really, really into that album at the
That's
time
right.
for you. And I remember you told me you had gone. Didn't you get to interview Matt Halpern for something?
I did,
Yeah.
yeah. At the first job I had, it was an internship at a company called Superjam.
Yeah.
And and at the time in the internship, I was more sort of into the journalism side of things. They expand that was about the time they were expanding into like the school and teaching as well, but they were mainly into journalism. And so I was going out every now and then, uh, doing like going to gigs and doing reviews. I think I just got like one review published on the site, and I think it's still there. And then the interview also got published, the interview with Matt Halpin.
Right.
And the way I got that was I was really big into reading drum magazines at the time. And so I think it was just like Drummer magazine, which is the UK's, or was the UK's biggest one. I think they've since moved on to online. But anyway, um, I found this interview with Matt Halpin in there, and I found who I think who the editor was of the magazine, or like whoever was in charge of that thing. And I messaged him
Yeah.
on Instagram or email. I just said, hey, I saw you done this. Like, I would really like to interview Matt Halpin. Like, can you like put me in contact with him? Actually, I think I might have asked, like, can you give me his number or something? And then he said, I can put you in contact with him. And then, yeah, Matt Halpin and I ended up talking over Facebook, and that's how we kept in touch. And then I sent him like a Word document of questions and whatnot, and then he just got back to me, and that's how we did it. And that was that's how that came about.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, and I remember you told me about that, and we were talking a lot about Periphery. I mean, yeah, we were talking about them a lot, and then just a lot of other like bands we were into, and then we went through that class, and it wasn't until the following year, I think, that you called me up to be in New Focus with you guys, and then you
Yes.
wrote a whole bunch of music. We did a whole bunch of performances around the school. We did
So fun.
do, yeah, yep. And that was a lot of cool. That was a lot of fun. And then we both graduated. You moved back to England, and then yeah, and then we stayed in touch. And I remember I around the time I started up doing the solo records, I remember I called you. Yeah, I remember I was wrapping up. I had just finished doing the drums I had just finished doing drums for the Transhuman album, and I was considering mixing the album myself, but I didn't want to do that. And I knew that like I had heard what you'd done with all of our friends' records and all the other records you had done. And I was just like, he's going to make this sound so much better. And it was like 2 a.m. my time. And so I think,
That's right. I remember how this came about.
yeah, I said, hey, can you do my album? You're like, well, hold on a second. And then
What happened was because I put on my Instagram story that was around yeah, so like beginning of what 2 years ago, something like that.
yeah,
And I'd put on my Instagram story that like, oh, I set my record, I'd mixed like 7 songs in a day. and
yeah.
and then you messaged me being like, how do you feel about like a 9 song like prog album? And I'm like, let me give you a call.
Yeah. And you had like just woken up too.
Yeah, I did actually. It was like 7 a.m.
Yeah, I didn't take into account at all the time difference. I'm just like, Charles is a musician. He'll be up. Hey,
It's true.
and then we got to talking. I told you what I was doing, and I sent you all the demos like immediately. And then, yeah, and then the record came about, and and it sounded amazing, of course. And so, yeah, but so that's a little bit of the history that we have. Obviously, we could rehash stories all day, but I kind of want to get into like a little bit more of the nitty gritty about. So, like, I
Oh,
think.
do we have to? I want to rehash stories. No, I'm
I mean,
kidding.
I'll keep rehashing stories all day long. It's great.
People will want to know for Instagram.
This is true. This is very true. Yeah. Well, actually, this kind of does relate to some of the stuff we've
Yes.
done. So I touched on this a bit in the last one, talking about when you work with so many different types of artists.
Mhm.
It's like I've said before, you've done stuff ranging from like full on just a cappella albums to like intense prog metal stuff like I've done, and everything in between. And you work with artists in the area and remote. So I guess
All remote.
you haven't done. Oh, really? Okay.
Aside from like the only time I work even with like people locally is when I do drum sessions. There's a studio down the road from me, Magpie Studios Kent. Shout out to Magpie Studios.
Yeah.
And that's the only time where even most of those sessions they're done remotely. The artist isn't in the room. I'm having where me and this artist duo we're talking about having our first like in-person session. What for me anyway,
Yeah.
in January.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's I'm really excited for that.
Is
So
this an
yeah,
artist? Is this artist like based out of Kent or London or whatever?
they're in London.
Okay.
I don't want to like say them who they are, but in case like I don't know for whatever reason it doesn't work. But I'm pretty confident it will.
Right.
But you know, once it's like confirmed and everything, then absolutely, I'd love to like shout them to the hills because they're awesome.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess the big thing is that I guess from an engineer's perspective, when you're having someone send you tracks,
Hmm.
it can get a little bit, maybe not where you're at right now, but at least to me it would seem like it gets kind of daunting because it has to be very, very organized and sent a very specific way. So for people that don't know, I mean, can you talk a little bit about like when you're working with an artist remotely, kind of how this works, and especially like when they're recording their stuff, whether it be on their own or with another engineer, like how you always want them to send the stuff. I don't mean read off the requirement sheet. I just mean just give people a general idea of like how this kind of stuff works, because not everybody gets to do this.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it's pretty much the same way as you send it to, you know, anyone that you would work with. Say if you're working with a producer, you'd send them, say, like a session or something to work with, or you'd trade files in some way. You know, I think we've moved past the days of having to use like hard drives or SSDs to like, you know, we still do sometimes, but for most people now, everything is happening with like online storage. So you send someone like a Dropbox folder with your tracks or your sessions or whatever. That's actually how I'm doing a lot of my stuff now is through Dropbox. But to answer your question, um, usually things come to me via like WeTransfer. So, uh, should I talk about just like what maybe like what I would ask for if people like need guidance on that kind of thing?
Yeah, especially if it's a person who's like, let's say this is their first attempt at making a record and they really do need guidance on all this kind of stuff.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I do have. I won't read off like the file prep guide that I send, but I do
I
have
have
one.
that.
Yes, you might have. You might even have an older version. I might have updated it since we worked together.
And all
Um,
black files.
yes. But yeah. So for people who maybe haven't worked with Mixer before and they're wondering, you know, how to send their files, I do have a file prep guide, and I just say, you know what, yeah, just make it. The crux of it is basically make sure things are clearly named, so that you know the general consensus I have is that you really can look at the track name and you can kind of get an idea for the sound it is. So you know it'll be like the classic example is Audio One doesn't really say anything, but I have had tracks that are labeled Audio One, and you know all the working titles that they're going with. But generally, I ask just like things are clearly named and that they start and finish at the same time, which means that all the files, no matter where they appear in the arrangement, where they appear in the session, they all start at the start of the session and they finish when the song ends, and they're the same length. And what that means is that when I take all those files and drag them into my DAW, which is Logic, everything lines up. Everything lines up. I haven't got to go like guessing where things should line up or everything. I have done it maybe a couple times where I've got like the rough mix and some of the tracks maybe like didn't bounce the full length, so I've had to just like listen to the rough and figure out where they go. When that happens, it's usually fine. Like I just get on with it.
Right.
But most cases, people are really good at just sending things like that where everything's full length.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. And I remember when I would be going through them myself, and I had done this before, but still just really making sure everything's lined up. Everything's, you can't go through that quickly. You got to make sure everything is done and labeled the right way. Otherwise, that's a headache of biblical proportions on your end.
It saves so much time when that like it's little things like that that the artist or producer can take care of on their end that I don't have to focus on later. And it sounds like, I'm handing off responsibility, or I'm thinking like, oh well, why can't I just do that? And to be fair, I could and I have done. But what it means is that I can, if all those things are taken care of, I can just focus 100% or most of my attention on just mixing the thing.
Right.
I don't have to think about I'm still prepping sessions, and I'll prep a session on one day and I'll mix it the following day, maybe. Yeah. But really it's just that I don't have to be thinking about housekeeping things. Yeah, that stuff can just be taken care of, and it means that I could focus all my attention on just doing the thing that I do best.
Yeah. Do you think maybe, because I know well, would you say that your experience with being the band director in the band that we were in together informed your producer and engineering abilities to a degree now? Obviously, band directing and engineering are not the same thing, but when you're a producer, you are guiding an artist and you need to know how the whole picture is.
I think you've nailed it right on the head there. Yeah, that was really like being leader of a band. It's a good experience to jump into taking charge of a project as, say, a producer, because for exactly as you said, you're making sort of like, or you're helping to make the artist to make those executive decisions. But I think beyond that as well, it's kind of like figuring out the dynamic between you and whoever you're working with, whether that be like you as a band leader with the rest of your band and like that kind of relationship versus you as a producer working with an artist, and really the kind of like trust that's informed between like those two pairs of relationships. And it's very different, I think, with bandmates. I think it is very important, and you can attest to this because you've been in a band with these guys for a while now, and the rest of your band. It's very important that you're all friends, and like really good friends as well, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. I don't produce very much, I have to say, but when I do, it's usually for someone like I know pretty well, or that we've had like deep conversations about music, and we've connected on that level, so we feel like, oh, we'd be a good fit to work on this thing together. So I think there's that element of trust between the two relationships as well. So yes, to answer your question, the experience as a band leader, it has informed my experience as a producer when I've needed to do that. Usually as a mix engineer, that doesn't really come into it so much, but I always make an effort to get to know the people that I work with, because it's just a lot better, really. I think there's only been, actually, I don't think there's really been anyone that has just like sent me a mix and just been like, okay, mix it, and there hasn't been any kind of like personal connection. There's always been something.
Well, yeah. I mean, even when I did the Transhuman album, I produced that album. I self-produced it, but
very well, I might add.
Oh well, thank you very much. And you mixed it very well too. But even you and I were having conversations back and forth talking about the story behind that album and what the point was I was trying to get across, and how like even though these are all a bunch of this is a collection of instrumental tracks, they're all here to tell a certain story. There's themes that reoccur, and there's there's a message behind each one of these things, and that way, so you knew what to go for, or you had an idea of what I was looking for, and you knew how to either capture that or make it even better.
I remember that conversation we had on Zoom with where you were telling me the whole story of the album, and I think then you were working on the I think it was like the artwork, or you were working on like the not the script, but like the screenplay, for lack of a better
Yeah,
phrase.
I was. Yeah.
And yes, and you were telling me the whole story of the album, and I was fascinated that you'd got into this much detail with it. I remember the thing I thought was so cool was you had like parts of like the artwork or like the booklet, and it had been like redacted by like
Yeah.
the overseers or the people in power,
Right.
and I thought that was just the coolest thing. Like that was just amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. One of these days that I may make it so that everybody can see that. I'm
Oh,
actually
please do, because it's so good.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And yeah, and I remember I am and this is another thing too when you're working with the band, even if you are a solo artist, don't be afraid to take input from your bandmates as well.
Mm.
I can guarantee you that if you think of like the Steve Vais or people like that, or Steven Wilson or people like that, yes, they are calling the shots and it is their vision. But they'll ask I'm sure every now and then they're going to ask, what do you think of this? Or,
Actually,
stuff like that.
yeah, and actually, so coming back to that thing you mentioned about asking me like guidance people who haven't worked with like a producer or mixer before, I think just in general, I think something that I said to you early on is when like you're giving me mix notes. I only wanted mix notes from one person in the band. I think it was either you or Joe. It might have been you actually. Um,
Oh, yeah. I would get everybody's collective thoughts and then put them together. Yeah.
yes, and it's so much nicer to do that on my end. Well, on my end, it means that I get notes from one person and one person only. I'm not getting like notes from you one day and then, a couple days later when someone else in the band has heard the songs, they send their notes and then, that those two are conflicting. What it forces you to do on your end as a band, and it strengthens your relationship, is to communicate and make those executive decisions together. So if there is a conflict, you can resolve it before letting me know, and then I can just think, okay, I need to do this, and I don't have to worry about the interband dynamics, as it were.
Communication is the most important thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's one of the reasons why the giant ballad on the album I do is the length that it is, and then there's a song after it called Question Mark. That
Mm.
was actually a suggestion of Joe Connect. For those of you who don't know, Joe Connect plays second guitar and keyboards in the band, and he and I co-wrote the song I do together in this very room, actually. And that song was originally a lot longer. It was like a minute and a half longer, and it just had this quiet just unaccompanied clean guitar with a lot of reverb and delay playing a theme that like would cycle back and forth between parallel major and minor, because it is part of the story. Within that, the main character is contemplating the big decision that
Mm.
he's made. But one thing he took into account was, all right, we're going to be playing this song live, and you may not want to use that extended ending every single night. He said, why don't you split that off? And what comes into play here, again, it's a good thing when you and your bandmates have similar influences, maybe not all the same, but similar influences. He and I are both huge Pink Floyd fans. And one of the things in The Wall, for example, is you will have tracks that are like a minute long or even 30 seconds long, and those are just transitional pieces. Like they're not songs per se. They're basically just like,
It's like an intermission.
and not even that. It's the thing. It's your fingers turning the page to go to the next chapter.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. I
Yeah.
really like that.
Or how sometimes you'll have books where the last paragraph will end, you'll turn the page, and then there will be one sentence, and then you turn the page again, and then and then the next chapter starts up. It's that one key. Yes, the connective tissue. Very good. Yes.
I was
Uh,
like, oh, Toby's here.
yes.
The
Um,
connective tissue.
I like that. Yeah. So and he suggested, all right, why don't you take that last part there, make that a separate track, and then that way you're kind of doing. And I had wanted to have stuff like that in the record anyway. He's like, all right, here's your opportunity now. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so
Sorry, I'll just
funny.
make sure the volume's down.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have had a few students of mine say, "Do you ever perform?" Question mark. I'm like, I've performed it a couple times. Yes. They're like, they're and now I say, look, I'll perform that song if you come out to the show. So yeah,
You performed the full. I remember the show. I wasn't there, but I remember when you performed like the whole album. Did you perform it
yeah.
for that one?
There were 2 nights we did that. Yeah. We did it on album release night, which was the day the album was released, and we did that at the record store in New Jersey, near where Joe Connect is from. I believe his friends own that record store, and it was fun to do it there because Joe always comes up to New England for gigs. So we finally got to do one in his hometown, and all his friends and his whole posse got to see us perform finally, which was great. So
Excellent.
yeah, so we got to do that, which was awesome. And then and yeah, so I did perform, we did perform that one piece in there too, the whole album front to back. Um and then but I also wanted to do a New England album release show too. So like a few weeks later, we did another album release show. And it was a big show. We had like 4 or 5 bands on the bill with us that night. It was a big night. And
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, they were all bands that, like, friends of ours we had played with throughout the area here in
Were you headlining that one?
oh yeah.
Nice.
Oh
I was
yeah.
gonna say because then you'd be lost on.
Yeah. We headlined that one, and yeah, and we performed the whole record that night too. And then of course we ended it with "Won't Get Fooled Again," like, which is usually our encore,
Excellent.
which was great. Yeah, yeah. I remember when we played "I Do," everyone was holding up either lighters or legit candles. You've probably seen me post those pictures,
I
so
have,
yeah,
yes. And actually, it's funny you mentioned that because that's so. I I'm a very visual mixer in terms of like what I think about when I'm mixing something. If I can get like an image in my head of something, it's usually like helps me sort of just to aim for something like a sonic vision. Sometimes it's not always, I need this instrument to be like this or this thing to be like that. Sometimes it's just I need to make sure that whatever I'm doing, it matches this vision I have in my head. And for yours, I was thinking this is very much like what I do. I'm thinking it's like big, like a stadium song, and it's the one where you get all your lighters out at the beginning, and then it just goes into like Joe's awesome keyboard solo.
yes, yes.
I remember I stopped mixing for like a good few minutes because I just put Joe's solo on repeat. I was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
I hope he's watching this now so he can hear that. But
Joe,
hey,
I hope you're incredibly self-confident because that is a really good solo. I hope you are watching this.
oh yeah, no, it's yeah. And yeah, no, that is great. That was great working on that song with him because it was purely collaborative. He was like staying here for like a month because we had a whole bunch of shows, and I had only had the very beginning of that song written, that clean guitar part. I'd
Yeah.
had that written, and that was it. I said, "This is all I got, and I want piano on this. I don't play piano. Can we do this together?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, of course." Uh, and
Joe's got it.
yeah, pretty much. And then I remember him putting, and I talked about this when Metronome Magazine out here interviewed me with it. I remember talking about how he sat down, started putting out that landscape that you hear in the beginning of the record, and then little by little every day we would just hack away at it. And
Mm.
me being the kind of person I am, I was getting us up at 7 o'clock in the morning every day, brewing a cup of coffee and just being like, all right, let's go. Let's start writing. And then he would just be like, now? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But again, look at the product we turned out.
Actually, that's kind of interesting you bring that up because I was thinking like, so when you were writing that, obviously like I'm taking like Joe was like staying with you for that.
Yeah. For that, yes.
Um, how and obviously you took like responsibility for like setting the routine and being like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. How do you find like the I guess the dynamics of being like a band leader versus like some like a really good friend? Like what like talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, okay, so it's interesting. So at the end of the day, even though I am the band leader and it's my name on the marquee and we're playing music I've written, everyone in the group wants the music to sound fantastic. Everyone wants the show to sound great because thankfully everyone in the band likes the music I've written.
Yeah,
You know,
helps.
and we get along so well that like, collaborations will happen. So there is that understanding, but at the same time, while I am calling the shots and I'm steering the ship and whatnot, everybody in this band understands. Everybody in this band has worked with me enough where they kind of can see where I'm going to go with steering the ship. And they also understand that I am open to, ideas if there's like, if there's anything that's not certain. I
Mm,
always say this I always say this in rehearsals too. I say, if you guys catch on to anything that I haven't addressed, please say something. Uh,
mm,
you
yeah.
know, because sometimes, you won't necessarily hear stuff. Brendan Small, who does Death Clock, Metalocalypse, he's the one steering that ship. All right. That is Brendan Small. But he is aware of the caliber of musicians that are in that band with him. And he has always said, look, one guy's opinion is completely boring. If you guys have an idea and you can beat mine, go for it. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
That's cool. Like just like right off the back of that, I think well then who's the judge of whether it's better than his or not? It's him, right?
Well, yeah, because it's his name that's up there. He still has to make that final decision.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't even know
Yeah.
where I was going with
Yeah,
that.
no, at the end of the day, you as the band leader have to make that final decision, of course. But if you're
Yes.
open to other people's ideas, that can make for something really cool, you know.
Mm,
And
absolutely.
as
It's
long
yeah.
and as long as everybody is kind of aware of, as long as everyone knows what the general product needs to sound like, and everybody wants the thing to sound great, then you're good to go. But
Yeah.
obviously you as the band leader need to be the most informed on everything because that's part of being the band leader. You have to be the most informed on all the details and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how that dynamic works out personally.
Yeah, it's the same with, if I'm a mixer working with an artist. If the person like whose, product, not product, if person whose music it is, if their vision for what they want is like super crystal clear,
Yeah.
um, that makes things so much easier. It makes for everyone involved, everyone that person gets involved with. And if you've probably found this with the band as well,
Yeah.
where you're like you said, you're the most informed. Like you know how things are supposed to sound. You're obviously open to people's ideas,
Yes.
and if it's gonna align with the vision or if it's not, if it's gonna like evolve it in some way, it's all yeah, that's all part of like the fun of like being a very collaborative environment, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it is a solo project and we're doing music I've written, and but that doesn't mean that if I'm writing something, I'm not going to show them a demo I've done and be like, "Hey, what do you think?" I do that. I'll be like, "Hey, here's something I'm working on. Let me know what you think." And and we'll throw ideas back and forth at each other sometimes if I'm like, "Hey, what do you guys think?" or whatever.
Yeah,
And you know, but of course, I'm not every single time gonna be like, yes, let's do that. You got, again, that's part of being the band leader. You gotta say yes and no to certain things, and they get that. That's the other thing too, which is great about this, is that like we are all friends, and we have a great time together. And if I say no to an idea, no one's gonna be like, because We're all trying, because it doesn't mean I don't like you or I think your idea sucks. It's a matter of it just doesn't work for this thing right here. And a lot of
Yeah,
times I'll either be like, I don't know about that for this. Let's put that on the back burner. What about,
yeah.
that's all part of what it's about. And you've done the same thing too with, well, when we were in New Focus together, and I'm sure with the band you have now, which is First Principle, you're doing the same thing. Although you're not the leader of that band, correct?
No, that is Toby. I'd say Toby is leader. We're kind of like I don't say like we're co-founders because it's Toby. I think it's very much like Toby's like love child to start with. But maybe like you can relate to this as well. Like even if I'm not like the founding member, I still feel very confident in like voicing my ideas and telling him when I think, you know what, I think this doesn't sound very good. Like but like I won't just say that and be like, this doesn't sound very good. I always come like, this doesn't sound very good, and here's what maybe we could try
Right.
to maybe like steer it in this direction. And I always trying to make sure that whatever I suggest or whenever I tell him something like that, it's because of something to do with the vision for the song.
Right.
Yeah, and you've probably found this with collaborating with your bandmates as well, and it's why it helps to have such a crystal clear vision. If you know what the vision is, you know you kind of know what ideas are going to work and what aren't, but you're also not afraid to let that vision evolve.
Right. No.
Right?
I'm not, because, well, especially like when Joe and I did someone named Laura Meets Musicians just hopped on.
Oh shit. Hi Laura.
Yeah, I want to
Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining.
I want to see the interview that she did with you. Can you send me that later? I want to see that.
It's on my Instagram.
Oh,
it's one of the pinned posts at the top.
Okay.
And that was a really nice thing that she did. I'm super happy that happened.
I will check that out. But so yeah, no, well, yeah. So when Joe and I were doing the song "I Do," I did have an idea before I even thought about bringing him on to do the song with me. I already had sort of an idea of vaguely of where I wanted things to go in there, but at the same time, I knew that when I brought him in, it's going to go in a bunch of different directions. And you have to be open to that because something really cool may happen. And you have to be okay with that kind of change because that cool thing that happens in there, first of all, it might be cooler than what you thought of. And even if something different happens in there and you're unsure of it, don't throw it away. Try it and see if that leads to, okay. Yeah. And then when you get that, okay moment, then it's like, all right. And, and so there was a lot of back and forth when we did that song, and that song definitely evolved. It still had that vision I wanted, but even other cool stuff that I didn't expect it to go. And I was okay with that because it's a great song.
Absolutely. Yeah. I Do is like one of my favorites on the album.
Me too.
It's so good. And I think it's for another reason as well. I think it stands out because it feels, I think, very different in terms of just like the songwriting to the rest of the album. I feel like I don't really know how to explain it, to be honest. But I remember when mixing it, I felt like this is a different kind of song to what's on the rest of the album. Maybe it was more like maybe I felt it was more like rock than metal, even though you have got like still very low tuned guitars on it as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All I knew was that like it was gonna be some sort of hey Greg, what's going on? Greg over here from I know, Greg on over here on Instagram. Greg's in Clockwork East Coast, which is an awesome wedding band.
Nice.
And he's also in the Felix Brown band and a whole bunch of other things, and he's an awesome singer and front man, so make sure you pay attention to him.
I'm also going to shout out one person that's just joined Paraxa Studios. That's Matt, who edited the drums on I'm Good.
Hey, there he is. What up?
What's up, Matt? Hey.
Got a lot of cool, got a lot of cool people on here. So, yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, no, I knew that that was just going to be. I knew that it was going to be a ballad of some sort, which I originally wasn't going to. Nice to finally meet you too, man. It I originally didn't want to have a ballad on that record. I just wanted to hit people in the face constantly. But then I was just like, well, this might make sense in the story, and this will give it some more dynamics. Because, even in a song, even when you're writing a song, it's going to have dynamics and slow parts and loud parts and all that stuff. So I was like, all right, let's actually try this. And this is also my attempt to, not my attempt, this is my chance to co-write something with Joe, which I hadn't done yet before. I had done like guest spots on some of his songs and whatnot, but this is our first time to actually write a song together. And I said, and it'll give the album some more dynamics than it originally had. Yeah. And then it's interesting. You have that song, and then you have two other songs that basically just like smash you over the head relentlessly. Corrupts and We Have Come.
I love We Have Come. We Have Come, I think that one was for me that was one of my favorites on the album. Like I felt like that was one of the, not to toot my own horn, but I think that's one of the best like mixes that I did on the album, and it feels so good to listen to that song. Like even before I started like getting into the weeds of mixing it, I felt, oh, this just feels so good. And also sometimes I go back and I just listen to the drum intro on Valkyria. Oh, it's so good. It feels very Judas Priest, I'd say.
Yeah, there's definitely elements of that in there. And Joe and I co-wrote that one together too, because we finished up I Do, and then I think we were just like, I don't even remember if we said, let's try writing another one, or if we were just jamming one time. Because I think I remember I turned on a click track because we were just sitting in my room and we were just playing guitar, running Neural DSP, which actually is going to segue into something I want to talk about later that we haven't touched on yet. But no, I do not have a signature plugin, people. That'd be awesome, but I do not have a signature plugin. Nor does Charles yet. But yeah, we were just jamming, and then I remember somehow randomly, like that second half where there's a complete tempo change and we're just trading solos back and forth. Yeah, I remember we were.
Is that the do da da do da 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 do? It's like that kind of that tritone riff you got going on. I think it's tritone.
No. No, it's when it goes from that tempo to.
Oh yeah, when it goes into like the upbeat part.
Yes.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking of the wrong song.
That's okay. Yeah, no, that just kind of happened randomly. All of a sudden, while we were jamming, we just went right into that out of nowhere. And I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but this sounds cool. We need to have this happen in the song.
It's such a guitarist's album, and I love it for that. So I really lent into that. Like, I think you said it on the really funny reel we did a while back, where you were like, guitarist on the mountaintop, hair blowing in the breeze, just going,
yes.
Wee! Whatever it was. And that whole section just felt like this has to feel like how people felt playing the final battle against the devil on Guitar Hero 3.
Yes.
Like, this has to feel like that level of intensity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's like one of those images that I bring up in my head when I'm trying to mix. Like, it has to feel, or like, if I listen to this, I want to like sort of look out there in my mind's eye, and I want to visualize that.
And you know what? I love how beautifully this is segueing into the part, because we're talking about creativity, seeing a vision that isn't completely calculated. Everybody's got a slightly different vision, and it makes for something unique that stands out. And this is and it's that creativity that is evoking these emotions and these feelings in us as human beings. Like you were saying, you can see a certain thing when you're hearing a song, which may be very different from what I'm hearing. But it informs those decisions and makes for a product that it stands out from everyone else. So, which is one of the reasons why we work together with people who are like-minded, but also, have different backgrounds and stuff and different tastes. Which brings me to an interesting point here. Now, we're talking about the Transhuman album that I did. You can go stream that on Spotify or go to my Bandcamp and check it out. But there is a story behind that, and one of the big topics in that song is that album is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And what would happen if machine learning and this kind of stuff, there are definitely uses for it. There's a lot of cool stuff that we've been able to do with it. Like for example, in the music world. All right. Take care, Matt. Good seeing you. There are cool things that we've been able to do. Like for example, Peter Jackson was able to use that technology to separate John's vocal from the piano with the new Beatles song that they were working with. Mm-hmm. And and same with in the guitar world, you have these amp modelers. You have what's called tone matching, where you can, if let's say you want to do a snapshot of another rig, the guitar, the software will take in what elements make that other rig you're trying to replicate sound the way it sounds, and then it will match that and then do an exact replica of it, so you can have that specific artist's tone that you're trying to get. Mm-hmm. All right. So there are cool things in there, but at the same time, we're seeing all these other applications and things that are making for AI to generate musical ideas. We've seen Rick Beato talk a lot about how people are using AI to do songs in the style of an artist, and that thing can almost perfectly match another artist's voice. And I've seen him show these examples of people saying, here, do an Oasis song, and it sounds like something Oasis would have written. They do the same, they do the same thing with other artists too. And funny enough, I have the score for Mamma Mia sitting out right here, right now, because I have some pit orchestra work coming up. And so I've been watching interviews with Bjorn Ulvaeus and Benny Andersson from ABBA. And those guys have a lot to say on the matter too, because they just did that show where they had holograms made of themselves.
ABBA Voyage.
That's right. Correct. And they've been asked a lot of questions about this. Bjorn Ulvaeus just did an interview, or Rick Beato just did an interview with him, and he was talking about how it's impressive, some of these technologies now that can do stuff in the style of an artist, but there's a lot of issues that come into play here, which I think a lot of us can intuitively think of, and that I've seen people address. Some people are seeing it as, you can look at it as like when synthesizers were invented and people were able to now generate musical ideas, like sampling different things or creating sequences, just using essentially at the time what was an antiquated computer. But at the same time, are we taking away from what artists can do? And I guess the bottom line is this something that we should be concerned about? Do we see it going a little bit too far now? So I want to know your opinion, and I want to know what the people listening think as well, because this is something I want to start speaking more and more and more about. I mean, I wrote a whole album about this kind of thing, except that takes it even further than just like music. But I want to know your thoughts on this stuff.
I mean, I think you kind of, you kind of answered, like, you kind of got my thoughts in it a little bit when you said, yeah, it did something in the style of Oasis, but it did it almost perfectly. I think it's not at the point yet where it's gonna churn out something that's quote unquote perfect, because there is no perfect music. Um, but it gets you very close. And I think, in that scenario, say just trying to generate something that sounds like Oasis, that feels like a gimmick. And, in that case, I think it is. Um, even if you're trying to get something that's like, maybe like you're trying to get your band in the style of Oasis or Metallica or whatever, it gets you very close, but I think you still might stumble when it comes to like trying to form something that has real, I don't know, beauty to it, I guess.
Right.
But what I think, it's interesting we're talking about this now actually, because I saw it was a discussion between Warren Hewitt and Jason Joshua,
Mm.
uh, which for the people who don't know, they are like engineers, mixers. Jason especially is one of my absolute idols as a mixer. Anyway, they were having a discussion at an event in Hamburg, I think, about this very thing, and they said something that really resonated with me. It's that all the stuff that's like you're able to generate really like good sounding material with AI. It doesn't necessarily mean like it's like the highest form of that art. What it does is it just sort of raises the bar for the average. It makes it a lot. What I think is good about AI is that it makes things a lot more accessible, and it's a good place to sort of jump off as ideas, as a launching point for ideas. ChatGPT, this is outside of music, but that's a perfect example for this. And me and my sister, we use it in a really funny way, and it's still, we're impressed by how well it takes our thoughts and puts them into.
Right.
We use ChatGPT to write sort of mock episodes of Succession.
That's funny.
It would be, write an episode of Succession where Tom and Greg, they get like progressively covered in jam or something. There was something to do with that, and then it became like a horror story in the middle of it.
That's
Or
interesting. Yeah.
we use it for that to just be funny, but it can be a really helpful tool as well. Like a couple other engineer friends that I have, and myself included, we use, say, ChatGPT to help come up with content ideas. If you put in, it'll be like, I'm a mix engineer for such and such artists. Give me like, I don't know, 50 ideas for content that I could use. And I go through the 50 and maybe like 10, 5 are useful. Like a lot of them are things that I'm not really interested in doing. Or they're variations on the same sort of thing, where it's like, talk about mixing vocals, talk about mixing guitars, that sort of thing. But it's a good sort of list point, and it gets you thinking, because then you think, oh, I don't particularly like that one. What if I took that and did it in this way? So I think that's what's good about AI. It's a jumping off point for ideas, but I don't think it's at the point yet where it can really create something that's truly beautiful. And we're going on a bit of an off topic here. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? There could be, some people could find AI art really beautiful. There's been some really awesome like AI generated art, and I think in that world, in like the sort of art and illustrations world, that there's more of a discussion for that being like more invasive. In that world, I think AI being more invasive in that world, because it can generate stuff that's really, really, really good and could be exactly what you're looking for. And hey, you don't have to fork out for someone to illustrate it for you.
But that being said, though, not to cut you off, but that being said, we talk about beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and Laura, I agree with you. I don't like using it instead of human creativity either. But so it's
I half agree with that.
Oh, okay.
Now go on. Sorry, I'll come back to that.
Okay. So what I was gonna say is, the purpose of art is to bring out a certain emotion, a certain feeling in the person that is beholding it, whether it is music or whether it is art. Now, I guess something we need to, at least as artists, be, aware of. You say that AI art is really like, has really taken a huge step forward, and maybe not as much as the music end of it. But that being said, do we need to be concerned that the audio end of it, do we need to be concerned that maybe producers and other people like that might resort to just using that rather than employing musicians and stuff, employing musicians? Do we need to worry necessarily that, with the ABBA show we were just talking about, that whole idea of using holograms and stuff, do we need to worry that like that might become something that people might start doing more of? Because you don't need to hire musicians to perform music at that point, and people are starting to really like it because it does look insane. I guess my question is this do we need to worry that this might be something that could happen?
I don't think so. You just said it. People thought it was insane and it looked cool. It might matter to. This is going to sound a bit down on musicians, and I don't mean it to be that way, but it might matter to musicians who are looking to get hired because, as you say, they could just be being replaced. We can come back to that. But for the general consumers of music, all that matters is what they get, the end result. They don't know, and a lot of people don't care about the work that went into it. Generalization. Mm-hmm. But all they care about is this thing that this artist has produced, or this show that I'm going to see, or this artwork that has been generated, or whatever. How do I feel about it? How does it resonate with me? Does it resonate with me? And I think, if you go and see a show where ABBA is replaced by holograms, which I think Michael Jackson did one before, didn't he? Or because it was after he died, that was done already. So it's not new, but ABBA have taken that and innovated it to make it into this amazing. They've built a whole stadium just for this show. I mean, that's a level of commitment. You can't not deny that's. Sorry, you can't not deny that would be like. I don't know. Double negative. You can't deny that that would be something worth seeing, and that a lot of thought and time and effort has gone into that, and to make something meaningful. And I think it just comes down to the consumer experience. If like people might really resonate with a piece of AI generated art. I know people who have used like AI generated art as their album, as their single or album cover, and it looks really good. It looks really good, and it does exactly what they want it to do. Right. And in terms of music, I think if people can utilize AI in a way that helps them get to the finish line, if it means they get them to that place faster, or for it inspires them to do something new on top of that, why not? It's just another technology people use to make music, and it's been going that people. I'm just gonna sound so like I'm gonna sound like such an old person, but
I'm older than you, so don't worry about it.
That's true, actually. Maybe you can tell me if this resonates. But with every new piece of technology that comes around in music, there are going to be people who embrace it and people who are afraid of it. And AI is, I think, just the next thing. And just like Warren Hewitt and Jason were saying, it raises the level of the average, but it's still average being the key word. Like, It's the average thing. People are worried about it being, taking over, or making things sound too homogenized or generic. And you know what? If it probably will, for those people that want to just stick with generic and homogenous, it's going to make that bar raised. People who elevate it beyond that are going to be the ones who have longevity, I think.
So you think the future of it is not it replacing the artist, but because that won't evoke the emotion out of people that music is supposed to. But you think rather what'll happen is that idea will be abandoned and people will use that technology but use it in the imperfect way that humans do to get a beautiful thing out, but just in a quicker way than we have been.
Yeah, it's it's an experience thing, absolutely. And in terms of say like a mixing thing, for example, do you use stuff like Neutron or Ozone, like isotope products? I love them. I use them all the time. They're great. I love isotope stuff.
And I should clarify, I'm not a technophobe by any stretch of the imagination. I use Neural DSP for like guitar plugins. I use, I'm obviously on a computer right now. I use Premiere Pro for video editing. I use Pro Tools for recording stuff. I have all different types of analog and digital guitar stuff. I use my Axe effects primarily when I'm playing live. I've got all this stuff and it's great. But like I said, there is the human element there. And Laura, to what you're saying over here,
watching too many sci-fi movies.
Yeah, well, no, I've watched a lot of sci-fi movies too, and I've seen other developments in this technology, which is why I have this concern. And I wrote an entire album about it. You see movies like Ex Machina and what have you, and it does make you think, is this gonna happen?
I think there are some places in where AI is it's a real concern. I don't know the full details on the thing with actors and that being or in like the movies or films and that being actors being used without their consent, like their faces being used for stuff. I think that was something that came up. I'm not familiar with all the details on that, and I can't really speak to that apart from the fact that yes, that sounds like a huge problem.
Yeah.
And that is obviously something that they're talking about and addressing right now. But I think for music, if it helps someone who doesn't really know how to produce or how to mix, how to get something that sounds really good, if it helps them get closer to their vision and make something that it gets them to a point where they can feel like, oh, this sounds really like professional. This sounds like great. And it's my song. Why not? It's just another creativity tool. I don't think we're going to get to that point in music where it's just going to take over everything. I don't think so.
Interesting.
We're all too human, and we can tell as humans, we're very alert to fakeness. We might like something that sounds fake. Fine.
No, I mean,
and there's a scene for it, absolutely. Yeah. But we can tell when something or someone isn't genuine.
Oh,
but
yeah.
that could also be part of this is the artistic thing. That could be part of it. Like the artifice of AI could play into like the story or the artistic side of whatever you're creating. It could sound very fake and it could make you feel that kind of, uncanny valley sort of tension. And that could be the artistic point.
The classic example of that is when people intentionally put the T-Pain effect on Melodyne and you have that stutter effect in your voice every time you change notes. Some people do that intentionally because they want that effect. But then you have the people that use Melodyne literally to just like fix a note here or there and you can't hear it.
Yeah, I love Melodyne. It's great.
Oh yeah, no,
it's so awesome.
Okay. Hey, Laura, thank you for hopping on and everything. And Laura,
thanks, Laura.
And Laura, I would like to speak with you too at some point about this too, if you are ever interested. Please, let's talk about this as well, because this seems to be something you're interested in too. So, but yeah,
I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Please do be. But yeah, so yeah, and I guess the other thing too to look at, and this is something Rick Beato has also addressed, is this is the thing with when people are using AI to generate stuff in the style of, and then it has to be trained on what other artists sound like. And then it starts pulling stuff from I don't know, you say do something in the style of Queen, do something in the style of Bring Me the Horizon, do something in the style of Nine Inch Nails, do something in the style of The Police, the style of Beethoven, Mahler, whatever. And then it starts pulling stuff out of there, but then and we've seen elements of this too. This happened with Old Town Road, where where Lil Nas used that sample that was supposed to be like a $30 sample, and it was, a generic one. But then that lawsuit happened because it actually had elements of a Nine Inch Nails track in there, and therefore that caused an issue. Now, what happens when this AI starts using elements of Freddie Mercury or whatever, and you're using it in the same way that Lil Nas X was trying to do Old Town Road? Who gets compensated when you start using what the AI spit out at you? And are they going to do something to compensate that other artist? If so, like, this is something that all the legacy artists who are still on record labels and all this, this is something that we need to think about for them too. Is this going to be solved, or are there going to be new laws put in place where it's like, you guys can go pound sand? This is just the way it is now, and they don't get compensated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in terms of compensation and like in fair use, I think that's a different conversation. But I think just in terms of creativity, I think it's not really an issue, AI, or it's not even an issue. It's not a hindrance. It's what's the opposite word I'm looking for? It's a tool. It's an aid. But yeah, absolutely. In terms of compensation, that's different. Where you're using material that's, it's the whole Ed Sheeran thing. It's very close to this thing. But I think it's like what I was talking about earlier. People aren't stupid. Like, they can tell if something reminds them or is very close, or maybe is inspired by something else. If you have something that's if you ask AI to generate something in the style of Oasis, and it does it very well, you're not fooling anyone if you were to release it. Like, people can tell. Like, they're going to be like, oh, you're obviously like an Oasis fan, or this sounds like Oasis. And whether beyond that, I think that's the bigger thing, really, in terms of like creativity. People think, okay, so this thing sounds like Oasis. So it's obviously a very big Oasis fan, and so what? So like, does that person resonate with that? Yes, great. No, they don't have to listen to it. That's the beauty of it.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's like you said, and it won't be an Oasis song. Yeah.
True. Yeah, I don't know why I'm lingering so much on Oasis, because I'm not an Oasis fan at all.
Probably because that was the first thing I brought up. Well, because that was the first time
Oasis will be the scapegoat, because I'm not really a fan of Oasis.
Okay, well,
and Toby says, yeah, it won't be an Oasis song.
Let me just flip a light on over here.
Sure. And that's exactly what I was saying earlier, Toby. Like, yeah, it's not an Oasis song.
Right.
Yeah, there had to be someone to come up with that style and those songs to begin with, to make the art that inspired the person to get the AI to generate the thing that was inspired by the art.
Right.
And then that's where it comes into play of like, oh, like, it sounds like quite generic or whatever. It's because we've heard it before. And if you can take that Oasis generated AI thing, or AI generated Oasis song, and develop it and make it into something that has your voice into it, you can still have it sound very inspired by Oasis, because you might really, really like Oasis and you want to take that inspiration and put it into your music, but you might not know or have the technical chops how to do that. So you get AI to generate an Oasis style song that you can then take forward from there. It's
like kind of when people, I mean, it's kind of like when anyone like writes, when a person writes something on their own and it may sound too much like something else, and then you augment it because clearly you're inspired by that other artist you're pulling from, but you got to augment it so that it doesn't sound like that. Like, I'll reveal to people now something that happened with the end of one of my songs, Corrupt.
Uh-oh.
So, well, no, this is where Joe Connect comes into play here. This is where the collaboration comes into play. We're kind of coming full circle here. Yes. So, Charles, you know this because you mixed the album, but for those of you that don't know, I have a song called Corrupts. The first half of it is more so just like a rock song, if for lack of a better word. But then it goes into some weird, quirky, like Dream Theater-y kind of stuff. Then it goes into a middle, ethereal, atonal kind of a thing. And then there's this long outro with a solo with this riff that just slams you in the head. And it's very, and it's very syncopated. And I remember it didn't sound like how it does now. It was very rudimentary. And I remember I showed it to Joe. I'm looking at what Toby said. I think in the future, human made will be part of the equation of moving people liking it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that's what I would hope for. Yeah. But so the riff sounded very rudimentary, and it basically, he said to me, this sounds way too much like Meshuggah. He said that this sounds way too much like this specific Meshuggah song. And he says to me, try adding elements into it that you do. Like, as a guitar player, I tend to do a lot of tapping. I'm really into that. Like multi-finger tapping, not just one finger. And I like to do a lot of those. And so he's like, try adding some of those into it to break up the riffs and whatnot. Or just some other stuff. And then I eventually did that. And then the funny thing he likes to say now when I send it back to him is he looked at it and was like, that's way better. This is way cooler. And then hangs up and is like, I should have just kept my mouth shut. Now I have to learn this thing. That's the clean version I'm going to put it as for right now. So I don't.
You're all better musicians because of it.
Yes, we are. And frankly, that section sounds way cooler now. He didn't tell me what notes or what rhythms to play. He just said, put stuff in there that you like to do to break the riff up. Make it more weird or something. Make it more dissonant sounding. And I did. And that's one of my favorite sections of it. And one of the moments that makes me so proud is if I show that to a student of mine, a younger student who maybe doesn't listen to that kind of music, and I show them that outro and they get the following look. And that was exactly the look I got from several students of mine when I first showed them the demo. They were like, what? Because it sounds like a bunch of wrong notes at points, but it's not.
Really cool.
Thank you. It's controlled chaos.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
It's bridled chaos.
Yes, indeed. With unbridled passion.
Love it. Thank you. Yes.
Bridled chaos with unbridled passion. And you know what? That's what I want with music to be from,
that's what I would say, like, in life.
Exactly. That's how life should go. No, that hopefully that's what music stays as, people, the tools that we have to make music are fantastic. And I really do like them, but I just hope that like music still does ultimately stay human. And that's my big thing, is that like music stays human, and we have this, we can have bridled chaos, but with unbridled passion. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think the very fact that, indie rock has made a huge resurgence into the mainstream is voice to that.
Yeah.
It's a very human genre.
Yeah, it is. No, exactly. And it's, yeah, I agree. It really is. And to see, where it's gone, where it's going, and the different, just how it's evolved over time. When people thought indie 10 years ago, we may have thought one specific sound, but now indie can mean almost anything, which is why now it's like being attached to other genre names. Indie rock, indie metal. And I mean, it means two things too. I mean, it's short for independent, but indie can mean two things. It can mean you're not attached to a record label or a production company, hence you're independent.
Mm-hmm.
Or it has that original meaning, which basically is you're not necessarily following specific rules, and you're kind of just forming this thing that is, it's not set to a formula, which in a way is what progressive music is too, but they have two different sounds.
I wonder what indie progressive sounds like.
Me.
Progressive indie. You, yes. Because I think as well, like sonically, it's I had a point about this, and now I might have just lost it. Sonically, it's also like a very kind of historic, like a homemade sort of sound to it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is why I'm thinking it's like resurgence of that indicates that people are interested in stuff that sounds human, and I don't think that's ever going to go away.
No. Where do you see, because you work with a lot of indie artists too, how have you seen that it's evolved over time too? And like, who are people, what are the influences you see so many like indie artists now that are releasing new music now are pulling from? Especially now that we're in what I talked about a few weeks ago with the 20-year nostalgia cycle.
I think it's interesting you bring that up because I really wasn't a fan of indie before. Like,
sorry, Neil.
Sorry, Nils. Yeah, I couldn't say that. I couldn't really name you any indie bands like when I didn't really like indie. But in terms of, well, obviously now I love it and I work with like indie artists as well. And like, I don't know, that whole thing of genre, it never really hit me in a sense. Like, I hate to sound like someone who's been like, oh, I don't want to like put labels or anything. It's just music, man. But it is kind of just like that. And especially now where people are genre bending and like genre tripping so much that there isn't like a strict formula for anything. And there isn't, you have to label something so that, people, or streaming services basically, and distributors will be able to categorize things and take analytics or whatever. But people just want to make music in whatever form that'll be, and it takes whether that be in like the 20-year was it the 20-year like genre resurgence thing? Yeah. Now we're seeing the 2000s like Y2K pop up again. Which I love. I'm all for that. I love it.
Oh yeah, me too. Especially as a DJ in a wedding band. Those
that must be so good.
Oh,
those songs are never gonna die,
dude. Notorious B.I.G. all day long. Well, that's 90s, but
I was gonna say NSYNC.
Well, that does pop up a lot. Yes.
Yeah. Although actually, it's kind of this is a separate topic, but like, actually, I didn't really listen to NSYNC at all when I was young, but when I was in the 2000s, I was born in '96, so like by 2006, I would have been 10, and it's like.
By the way, Chad Saliga just hopped on. What's up, Chad?
Chad, thanks for hopping on. Good to see you.
Yeah.
My favorite band at the time was Busted. That was who I was listening to. I loved Busted, and I also loved the Top 40. So when I was 10 years old, I was like listening to like Bass Hunter or Flow Rider or something like that. And it was just whatever was in Top 40 and on the Now That's What I Call Music CDs.
Right.
But I can't remember what the point was about that. NSYNC, like I wasn't really an NSYNC fan, and now that they're coming back and they're releasing new music, I'm now getting more into NSYNC. It's like, I think it's a very good thing to do. But anyway, that whether it be the genre resurgence that people are leaning into that, or whether they're just taking stuff that they've loved all over the years or stuff that they love now and just like going, what if we took this and this and made a baby out of it in the form of song?
Right.
What would that sound like? And it's such an exploratory time. I know this is like veered way off from your original question. I'm sorry.
That's fine. This is what we do on podcasts. We're going to go all over the place. But you said a lot of people wrote to you asking questions, and I want to answer those, especially if you're still on here.
Yes. I don't think I can see if any new ones have come in on the story or not. By if
I
unless I quit the stream on Instagram.
oh
But
well, Matt.
I
Matt.
saved.
Matt asked a bunch of questions, but he's gone now.
Oh, are they in the chat?
Yeah, no, not in the chat. Like he actually added a question in the question bar.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did, but I think only I'm able to see them. Yeah, it says
Okay.
Paraxa Studios, but like
Can you see them?
I can see them. Probably because
There's questions on the actual stream.
no, not on the stream. There's a button that says this is us figuring out Instagram, everybody. There's a
You all tuned in just for this.
Exactly. Yes, you took time from your busy schedule before
This
Monday.
really shows how much older you are than me. No.
Yes. No, there's a button at the lower left right hand corner that is like a bubble with a question mark. You hit that, and then it'll pull up a bunch of questions that like people can have entered in there. It's not in the chat.
Oh, I see. So like if people ask questions, like we can check them in there.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can too, or just me because I
can see the thing. Let me see what happens if I push it. Oh no, yeah, I can see that.
All right, so let me do the first one.
You can show questions on screen. Do
Okay.
you want to go through those, and I can load up the ones that I screenshot from my story?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, sure. So all right. So Matt from Paraxa Studios, very decisive question. Pineapple on pizza? Absolutely not. Next.
Hang on. Wait, are we both answering?
Yeah.
Because I love pineapple on pizza. I think the less said about that, the better.
How do I permanently delete all of this? Now, you're clearly not Italian.
No, I'm not. I'm half German. So.
Yeah, and very British. So
yes.
All right. So, do you ever put little details into your music to mess with the listeners? Yes, I do. What about you, Charles?
I mean, I'd say this is more directed to you, but I there's definitely stuff that I like to put into mixes, not to sort of like mess with the listeners in a good way, to make them kind of be like, "Whoa, that was really cool." I guess like in that way, mess with people. I don't know what he means by mess with people.
Well, I do have some things that like I've done.
Oh, see you, Chad. Sorry.
Oh, see you, Chad. Thanks for hopping on. There are things that I like to do when I do like metal arrangements of songs, like tip the hat off to some other people, though I don't really. I've told one person what I did with a certain arrangement. My band and I perform a metal arrangement of World in My Eyes by Depeche Mode. And there is a little something I did in there that's a very nerdy kind of thing, and I don't want to say to everyone what it is, although I might change my mind later. I think I told you what it is. It involves one of our favorite producers.
Who?
Who produced that album, Violator?
Flood? I don't know.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. I knew it was gonna be like one of three.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, all right, we're gonna get really nerdy here, and the people that stay on here, you guys are the dedicated fans. So Flood is the guy who produced Depeche Mode's Violator album, which has Personal Jesus and World in My Eyes and all those songs on there. Basically, that and Songs of Faith and Devotion, the two biggest albums they ever did. And he's also done tons of other artists. He's done
This Is War, 30 Seconds to Mars. That's the one that we talked about a lot.
And that's actually you even went you even jumped right ahead to my point. Yeah. So I was going to list all the other artists he's worked with, but that's what Wikipedia's for. And Discogs. So he did the 30 Seconds to Mars album, This Is War album, which is my favorite record by them, actually. Not necessarily just because he produced it, but because the songwriting on it is incredible and the performances are incredible. It is so good.
So good.
I know, right? Yeah, everybody should watch the movie Artifact. But so the opening song, I should say, because the opening track is Escape, but that's not a song. The opening song on that album is track number 2 called Night of the Hunter. And it has the specific drum intro that goes.
I know that one.
Yes. When we play my version of World in My Eyes, the Depeche Mode song, as kind of a tip of the cap to Flood. My brother plays that drum beat in the very beginning of the song.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Ethan, well done. Yes.
Yep. And you wouldn't know that if, well, A, I didn't tell you, or you were a huge fan of both those artists, knew those details, and then thought, wait a minute, that sounds like, oh, he didn't because,
I love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So there's that right there. I told a couple other people about that. And I told a couple other people that were at a gig of ours recently when we played that. I told them that fact and they had the same reaction as you. They weren't like musicians or engineers or whatever, but they're avid music fans. So when I told them that, they absolutely loved it.
I can actually speak to like one thing that maybe like it wasn't like messing people's heads, like going back to Matt's question about like putting things in music that mess with the listeners' heads. I can talk about something that's like hidden in the track Transhuman.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe did I show you like the hidden audience in that?
Oh, the crowd shots, yes.
Not just the crowd shots, but there's actually like an audience like chanting and during the solo.
Oh yeah, and this was actually something I learned, this mix technique that I didn't know was what something every engineer likes to employ, or maybe not all of them, but a lot of them do, just to yeah.
It's a very popular one. Like, well, the trick is basically you're just like filling the space with a little bit of white noise to make it seem bigger than it is. It's very much like a psychoacoustic thing, psychoacoustic effect. It's really cool. I love that kind of stuff. Trick your brain to feel like you're hearing something when you really are not. Right. But anyway, so in the track Transhuman, in the solo, like after it comes down to like the it comes back up like the and then you have your two finger tapping.
Yes.
When you come into the solo, there's obviously like an audience going like on the downbeat leading up to it. There's like this like it's tucked in there, but it's there. It pairs with the guitar that's going that as well. And that I think I actually made that sound. I had a little bit of a production moment in there because I did like the Logic speed up, if tape speed up things. We could go like, to be like tape start again. Classic trick, but I paired it with an audience going, and then it goes, and then that crowd noise lingers for a bit, and then the second half of that solo before it goes back into the kind of like the main riff part again.
Right. Hey, Ollie's on.
Hey, Ollie. The audience starts going,
right,
like in time with everything. You can't hear it in the track, but I've tried like putting it in and taking it out, and it is one of those things. Usually, I would add something to be like, okay, like it's going to increase like the perceived size, or it's gonna, it's a felt not heard thing, and there's a little bit in this, but in this case, I think it was just more the fact that hidden an audience in the track, and like only I and the people I've told know that it's there, and that's something really cool.
That is super cool. And I remember you showing me elements of that when we were going over like guitar tones and stuff like that. And you were just like, check this out. And I remember you type audience, and I'm like, this isn't a live record. You're like, then stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Just stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Watch. he didn't say that, but yeah. So no, I mean, yeah, stuff like that is always so cool. And it's amazing what like how much of a difference those little things can make too. I could go on another trick that I know about the song Personal Jesus, but then this becomes the Depeche Mode podcast, and that's not what this is. I may go into it next time. All right. What else did Matt say? What is the strangest circumstance you've had a funky song idea come into your head?
Wait, what?
I feel like he may have left a word out. What is the strangest circumstance you've had a funky song idea come into your head? I guess he means like
maybe like what's been like an unexpected time you've had a song idea come into your head, maybe?
Or what's the weirdest idea you've had come into your head?
Maybe.
I don't know what the weirdest idea that come into my head is. I've had lots of weird ideas come into my head. I'm a musician. May I remind you that I'm crazy as it is.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So who really says it's weird? But
Yes, it is. And then what else? Max, there any genres you take particular inspiration from in your original works? Any genres you tend to avoid? I don't avoid any genres.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't avoid any genres whatsoever. I, as as a guy that also does DJing for a wedding band or plays in a wedding band in general, I have to play a lot of different styles of music. Not only that, I do pit orchestra work. I've got the score for Mamma Mia open right here. There's good stuff in pretty much everything. You just got to find it, and then you filter it through your own influences and stuff and see. Like, again, a great example is when you and Charles edited and mixed my rendition of David Guetta's rendition of I'm Good, Blue. All right. I'd been DJing.
Such a fun project.
Oh, thank you.
That was so fun.
I had been DJing that song for a while now. And did the stream didn't end on YouTube, did it?
I don't know, did it?
I have no idea. It looks like I'm frozen on there, but I can't tell.
You look fine on Zoom. Like you're saying the stream on there right now, so I can't really speak to how well it's doing on YouTube. But
yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll just keep going.
I'm just gonna keep going. Anyway, yeah, I'd been DJing that song so much because, well, it had just come out and it was so big it got nominated for a Grammy. So I was like, this song. Oh yeah, it did get nominated. It didn't win. It lost to Sam Smith, but whatever. And I was just like, this song is good. Like, I'm going to do something to this. And I did. And here we are.
Have you tried like dropping yours in at weddings, like your version?
That would be hysterical.
And you just drop it in and you'd be like, if people see how people react, and if they start freaking out, you'd be like, "Oh, sorry, wrong one," and then you just put your David Guetta's one on.
That would be really funny. I don't know if that would be really funny. I don't know if I would necessarily do that, but it's something to consider. Yeah. So, all right, but anyway, any genres I take particular inspiration from, there aren't any particular genres. I mean, I have a background in a number of different things. I grew up on classic rock and classic metal to really just be very, very straightforward with it. But
Frank Zappa was a big one for you, I think.
Well, yeah, I was about to delve into that. Yeah. Frank Zappa, Steve Vai, classical guitar, The Police, Jeff Beck, Alan Holdsworth, Rush, yes. And again, I'm naming a lot of classic artists right now, and Joe Satriani and people like that. As far as like the classic guys are concerned, those are people that I've pulled a lot from, and still The Who, that's my favorite band of all time, and Led Zeppelin, of course, but also the 90s grunge era, which I grew up in, that I got a lot of stuff from that. Like, people that hang out with me will tell you I am like a ginormous Soundgarden fan. And
yes.
And I'm still thankful to this day that I got to catch them before Chris Cornell passed away. It was a double
Really?
It was a double header with them and Nine Inch Nails. And oh my God. Yes.
That sounds amazing.
It was the last tour Soundgarden did, I think.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was at Jones Beach in Long Island, and they put on an unbelievable show. Chris's voice was great that night. They played the song Super Unknown, which I was really happy about. Nice. And yeah, so I would say, yeah, those are kind of the elements that I tend to gravitate towards, but I also gravitate towards a lot of like classical guitar because I have a background in that and stuff like that. But again, I tend to pull from everything in one way or another.
Mm, I agree. Like you gravitate a lot, I think, to stuff that's I say this is going to sound very degrading to sort of like more modern music, but I think you gravitate towards stuff that's very well structured and very well arranged, as evidenced by the in the album,
Right.
the track absolutely, and
Yeah.
all of the themes from all of well most of the songs coming back in this one song, and I absolutely loved. I just listened to that sometimes. I loved hearing just everything come back, and I love when artists do that.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember I knew I wanted to have a song, like a long song that like encapsulated all the themes, doing like a big summary of the album. I was a huge
Mm,
fan. I've always been a huge fan of concept albums, like for example, The Wall, Scenes from a Memory, and stuff like that. A Catch 33, because that is a concept album too,
hmm
the Meshuggah record, and Juggernaut.
Juggernaut. Yep.
Wow, we said that at the same time. And yeah, I've always loved albums like that where the themes come back and all that kind of stuff. And it's I wanted to do something like that myself. And you're right, I do take from stuff that has a lot of structure to it as well. I love and you're right, I do pull a lot from modern artists too, not just the classic artists, people like
Mm,
Pliny and Meshuggah and Animals as Leaders to a degree as well. I take, my ears are open to everything. And
mm,
this is the thing I love to tell everybody, Alter Bridge. There's stuff,
mm.
I tell people this all the time. If you look at what I've been listening to, it doesn't make sense because it's all over the place.
Same.
It's all over the place. I'll be listening to Steely Dan one moment, but then one moment it'll be Depeche Mode, then one moment it'll be Meshuggah, then one moment it's Deftones, then one moment it's 9 Inch, then one moment it's Animals as Leaders, then one moment it's The Police, then one moment it's Frank Zappa, then it's Steve Vai, and then it's just like Max is insane. But again, this is something I tell all my students too. Don't just listen to one thing. Listen to as much stuff as you possibly can. You're gonna find something cool in everything. And people are surprised. A lot of people, like where I teach, know me as the prog metal guy, but that's because that was the music I was primarily writing when I
Mm.
first started teaching a lot of people there. So that's immediately what they've called me. I'm the prog metal guy that can play a ton of notes and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I do that, but that's just one element I do. When I told
Mm.
people I was going to Depeche Mode for Halloween, they were like, wait, really? I'm like, yeah, I love that band. They're like, you do? I'm like, yeah. I'm waiting for the moment I get Duran Duran tickets and tell people that I'm going to see them. Then people are really going to be like, huh? Like, yeah, I love that band too. I wish Niels was on here right now because then we could talk about that. But then we
Uh-huh.
would go off on a Duran Duran tangent for an hour. But you
I'd
see,
love that.
I would too. But yeah, that's the thing. It's important to listen to as much stuff as you possibly can, not only just as just a consumer of music, but as a musician. That's going to inform what you do, and that's going to make you stand out from everything else. And then there is that human element that we've been talking about,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
AI will process it a very, very specific way, but maybe not as in the creative and we'll say quote unquote flawed way that humans do too. And
Hmm
again, just my hope is that people don't find that perfect way of doing it and with how it develops to be the only way that people are going to want to do it. And then people just only gravitate towards that to the detriment of the creative element. But from what I've been reading from people too, it seems like nobody's going to want to lose that human element, and people are going to want to have music made by humans and not just go straight to that. And let's just hope that they're right. Again,
I think so.
I wrote a whole damn album about this, so you know.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I'm on the same page as you in terms of like what I listen to being like completely varied, and it's like part of my work ethic as well, which is I think why I've been able to like transition from doing like primarily rock and metal mixes to moving into like pop and indie and these more like I guess like more accessible, more mainstream um, music genres. Is
Yeah.
because that's what I grew up with, and I grew up with music from everywhere. And it's like there would be um, I was in the car and there'll be like Katie Tunstall on in the car when my cousin lived with us, or that my mum really likes like R&B, or like so there'll be like Stevie Wonder and like kind of like Motown classics as well. She had Say a Little Prayer for You, um, and when it was coming out in my sister's room, that was a huge thing as well. Like basically like all the emo scene coming out of my sister's room, and then suddenly I gravitated towards like emo bands.
Right.
And then I sort of discovered like metal and like Avenged and Slipknot and all that kind of stuff. And then I sort of went further, and I went to like Arch Enemy and Death Clock and that kind of stuff. And
Right.
then but at the same time, my favorite band in the 2000s was Busted, and I really liked Busted and McFly and Bass Hunter and Flow Rider and what was in the top 40. I loved Kelly Clarkson, and
Yeah.
now like it's just the same. Like, I love the new Dua Lipa. Spirit Box just released a new one, which is
Yep.
freaking cool.
It is.
My favorite band, I my two of my favorite bands. My favorite one right now is Sleep Token.
Mm.
I will wax. Okay, yeah, your Duran Duran thing is my Sleep Token thing. I will wax lyrical about Sleep Token for ages, and
Right.
I will show people Sleep Token until like they're convinced that they're as good as I think they are.
You should be their publicist.
I am pretty much. I had a really good Uber ride home from London, and just during that whole Uber ride, I introduced the guy to. He was actually listening to Porcupine Tree.
Ah, okay.
Like he had Deadwing on, and I was like, "Oh, you've got this on." Like we started talking about Steven Wilson, and he just passed with the aux cable. Was like, "Put on something," and I put on Sleep Token, and we listened. Like he made a bunch of recommendations, and then I basically gave him Sleep Token to listen to.
Nice.
But like Silk Sonic, Jacob Collier,
You saw him.
I did. I've seen him twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Wandering Hearts, Cancer Bats back in the day. Oh, I like the new Doja Cat. That's really cool as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's just like maybe my brain. I can't just stay focused in one place.
Oh yeah. Me neither.
Musically, I feel like if I stuck to one thing, I would get incredibly bored. A and B, I would just quit because like for that same reason, I would just get so bored. And
Yeah.
being able to sort of like be a chameleon and be versatile and listen and like work with people in these genres, it opens you up to meeting people that you wouldn't meet if you just stuck with one thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's so fun to do that. Yeah, you've probably found that as well. The difference between like people you meet at your shows versus pit orchestra stuff or musicals.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. And that's one of the reasons I do pit orchestra work is because it's different from anything else I do.
And isn't it so freeing?
Yes. Because well, first of all, I don't have to be like the one of the biggest differences between it and my solo work is I don't gotta be in charge of it.
That's true.
You just give me something to do. And oh, Toby, thanks for being on.
Oh, thanks, Toby. See ya.
Yep. When are you and First Principle gonna do a US tour so I can see you guys and then troll the crap out of you from the audience?
I mean, come to one of the UK shows first.
Okay. Well, once I have the money, I will.
Come to the UK, and then you can be our sponsor to come to the US.
There we go. Sounds
Sorted.
good. But yeah, no, I mean, this stuff is like so much fun to do. And not only that, I'm one of those people too, where like, if I get into a band, I got to really, really, really know everything about them. Hence why I'm this, people like to consider me a music history buff, and I kind of am to a degree. I mean, how many times were we sitting together at college and I would just start at like 2 o'clock in the morning going into the significance of the history of this era and start naming all the bands and going into all the specifics. And you would be like, it's 2:30 in the morning. Can we resume this tomorrow, please? Uh, I'm the guy who, if I get into a band, I got to watch every documentary. I got to listen to every record. I got to know who did what. Even when I bought Depeche tickets, and I already knew a lot about them already when I bought the tickets, but I went and watched more documentaries. And, you know,
Yeah.
and Joe Connect went with us to the show, and I kind of got him more into that band too. He knew of them, but being around me, he got to hear them more and more, and he got more interested in them too. Obviously, being a keyboard player, he thought, he really liked the stuff, and that had an influence on him too in some of his keyboard playing. I'm sure if he was on here right now, he would definitely elaborate on that. So yeah, and they put on a
We
great.
we need to have like another one of these where we can like keep talking about this stuff for sure. And I
Yeah.
mean we need to get Joe on. We need to get Niels on.
Yeah, well, I definitely am gonna do one with Niels at some point, just him and myself. But
That'd be so good.
if we could do like a four-way one where it's you, me, Joe, and Niels, and we talk about all this kind of stuff, and like you and Joe, especially, the three of us, we could talk about like keyboard production and stuff like that. What you like as an engineer, one of the things you gravitate towards when dealing with keyboard stuff. I mean, actually, here's kind of a generic question, but like when you got the keyboard heavy tracks on my album, what that I'm guessing that wasn't the most extensive keyboard work aside from Darian that you had ever worked with, was it?
Well, even with Darian's stuff and Garnet, his band, even though that was primarily centered around keyboards, I think both with you and Darian, it's less about the instrument and more about the arrangement and the song. So even with Darian stuff, it wasn't just keyboard all the time and taking the lead. You know,
Yeah.
there were guitar solos, there were moments where I got to do like little drum solos that were really fun. And same with you as well. Like Ethan got his drum intro at the beginning of his drum hook at the beginning of Valkyra. And there's really other great drumming moments on that album as well. And you have like the parts where the guitar stands out, the parts where the bass stands out. I remember that was a big part of the revision notes, is like just getting more of the moments where the bass was like trying to cut through a bit more when they had cool moments. And I'm so glad you pointed those out because they ended up being really cool parts.
Mm.
Um, and and it's not just like a guitar. I mean, it is pretty much like a guitar-centric album, but it's all in service to the music and
The
the
song is the most important thing.
that's what I mean. Yes, the song is the most important thing. So, in answer to your question, like it's not the most. Your question was just tell it to me again.
I was just asking, like, was like when Joe did like the more keyboard heavy tracks on the album, like I do, and
Yeah.
absolutely, was that like was that besides Darian's work? Was that like the most extensive like keyboard stuff you've had to work with? And did you?
No, I wouldn't say so. It's in terms of maybe like a rock mix, maybe, but no, I wouldn't say so. Like you bring it over
Because
to pop.
he would send you like 12 keyboard tracks in a song sometimes.
Yeah, but then you get to like a pop track and like there's a lot of synths sometimes.
Right. Yeah. You might have like 60 in there, something.
Maybe like um sometimes you get um I would see like the finished stem of like a particular track or something, but within that there'd be like three or four different layers of keyboards into that, making up that one sound. So I can't speak to how much like of the production went into that kind of thing, but
Right.
um, yeah, I wouldn't say yours is particularly keyboard heavy.
Oh no, no,
Maybe,
just those two songs were. I
well,
mean,
no, I wouldn't even say like those two songs are particularly keyboard heavy. They're just maybe I do in the sense that there are quite a few more like synthesized sounds on that one. Like there's like obviously the keys, there's the key solo, the synth solo, and then there's like the organ, and you've got like choir in there as well.
Yeah.
And when those moments happen, if it feels appropriate, I loved being able to bring them out. You know, at the end, after Joe's solo, when it goes into that big like choir and organ part, the guitar takes a back seat, and it feels really good to bring those elements out,
Right.
and really let those shine. It becomes a moment. It's a scene change. It's a
Right.
change of the image in my head. If we want to come back full circle,
Yeah. No,
um,
I do get that. Yeah.
it's the heavens opening up. Or in absolutely, there's that part right before. I think it's the like the end part where there's that sort of sweep where Joe's keyboard goes like
Oh
wow.
yeah.
I love that part. He put that in one of his songs as well. It was in the Halo when he did
Oh
the Halo overture.
yeah.
It's in there
Yeah.
as well. So I was like, that's a very Joe thing to do. So
Yeah.
I brought that up absolutely because I thought that would be a nice little nod to his thing.
It's the wow sound.
Yeah, the wow.
That was impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
You need
Inhale.
yes. And yeah, it's called inward singing.
We
We're not I'm gonna get kicked off Instagram if I recite that. So
will, yeah.
I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, no, I get that. And speaking of, having so many tracks in there, and I'll call it on this because I think the stream is gonna stop eventually in like 7 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, but because I could talk about this all day, but it's interesting when you dive into mixes of your favorite songs and whatnot. I was watching an interview with Kevin Paul who did the 5-1 mix. I'm sorry we couldn't get into 5-1 mixes on here, but we can do that next time.
Absolutely. Let's do a part 2.
Yeah. He was, yeah, you should come to America and we'll do part 2 in person. Okay. He was talking about when he did the 5-1 mix for the whole Depeche catalog actually. And this was in like the early to mid 2000s when he was doing it. And the tracks would come over to him. He was working in Pro Tools. They were copied from the analog tape and then sent over to him. And then he would look at how many layers. And the interesting thing with that album is, even though it's a very electronic based album, the big thing about that from a production standpoint that people talk about with that record is all the individual sounds are an amalgamation of like 5 to 6 different sounds all put together to make one specific sound out of all the sounds you hear in a song. And so you can't necessarily pinpoint what each individual thing is. Yeah, you can hear maybe what a sequencer is, but like when you try to pinpoint, like for example, to give a very obvious example, the when you listen to Personal Jesus and you hear the drum beat in it, the ta 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 ta. Well, that's not just a drum kit. That's a combination of drums, but also the band stomping on flight cases, layered up multiple times. And they did the Zeppelin levee brakes trick of hanging mics from a stairwell. And then they would layer that over and over and over and then sample it up and then make sure it was in time and everything.
That's cool.
And stuff like that. And so he said he would look at, so what Kevin Paul said was when he would look at the session, there would be sometimes 100 or something tracks in there and so many different layers of things. And the really difficult part for him, and this will be interesting to talk about because he was that he would have to reverse engineer everything because all the tracks were dry. And if you want to hear him talk about the headache he had in trying to recreate the vocal effect on Personal Jesus, it's really funny when you see him talk about that because it took him a month to figure it out.
I'd love to see that. Is it? He said it's a documentary.
No, it's like an hour-long interview he did on Vaughn George's page here on YouTube. You can
send that to me. I really want to watch that.
I will. Yeah, I've watched it a million times. It's great. But yeah, he said he was tearing his hair out trying to figure out reverse engineer what the vocal effect is on that, because if you think about it, that is the sound of the record. That sound of his voice on that's the sound of not just that record, but their career, kind of. Like that
Yeah.
song, Personal Jesus, is Depeche Mode's Freebird. So it is.
Yeah, no, yeah. I just haven't heard that comparison, but you're right.
Yeah. You cannot get that song wrong if you're gonna, remix it, and you got to reverse engineer all this stuff. So he was tearing his hair out for like a month doing it, and I won't spoil it. Just go watch that video because it's awesome.
Okay, I will.
Well, I think Zoom is eventually going to turn itself off on us. So, Charles, thank you so much for coming on here, dude. This
was really fun. I don't want to like be presumptuous, but I'd love to do a part 2 because like there were so many questions that we didn't get to answer that people have sent in.
Oh yeah, and I've been saying this to everybody that I've had on here that I have to do via Zoom. I want to do a part 2 and do it here in person, either in my apartment or if it's at a studio that I'm hoping to not acquire, but be able to do it from eventually.
I'd love that.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for everything. Everyone, stay tuned. I'll be giving updates for the next podcast. If you want your album mixed and or mastered, make sure you hit up Charles. I've already put all of his social media stuff in the description in YouTube. So make sure. And Charles, while we're speaking it, and for people on Instagram, what's the best way people can get in touch with you for a mixing or mastering project or producing if they want to do that?
The best way people can get in touch with me is just Instagram, and it's just all one word, all lowercase, Charles Henry Volk. It's all one word. And hit me up, message me, and that's the best way.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Do you prefer to hear demos first, or do you just what do you like to hear?
I mean, it's always nice to know like what I'm gonna be like working on. If it's always good to hear the music before we sort of jump into a conversation.
Of course. All right. Well, all right, everyone, you take care. Thanks to everyone that hopped on. And Charles, thank you for doing this. Let's talk.
You're very welcome.
Soon.
Thank you.
Let's find out when you're supposedly coming to America, and then let's see if we can do a part 2 in person.
That would be awesome, man.
Awesome. All right. Take care, everyone.